Hold on, because this is the moment that sent the internet into overdrive. Drake sending what some are calling a video aimed at Jay-Z, right in the middle of Jay-Z's own GQ interview going viral, has lit the internet all the way up, and we're going to break down exactly what led to this moment, what's in the video, and why it matters. So first, let's start with the video itself. Drake posted a video on his Instagram that instantly grabbed the attention of the entire hip-hop world, and the timing was impossible to ignore. It dropped just days after Jay-Z sat down for a rare, nearly 8,000-word GQ cover story for the April 2026 issue. In that interview, Jay-Z talked about the Kendrick Lamar and Drake situation. He talked about his own lawsuit. He talked about his legacy, his family, Roc Nation, and the Super Bowl. He talked about everything. But in the middle of all that, he addressed Drake not by directly going at him, but by speaking about him in a way that placed himself completely above the conversation. He said things like, "They drag everybody in it. Like, everyone's part of this conspiracy to undermine Drake, I guess." And then came the line that went viral immediately, "I'm Jay-Z." Now, on the surface, that might sound like a dismissal, but to Drake and to people in Drake's camp, those words landed very differently, because they came from a man who had, in Drake's view, spent the last 2 years working behind the scenes to help his career take a hit. So Drake, in characteristic fashion, did not respond with a press statement. He did not call into a podcast. He did not send subliminal bars on a Lucy. He posted a video, and the contents of that video are what have the internet losing its collective mind right now. To understand why that video hit the way it did, you have to understand the full scope of the relationship between Drake and Jay-Z. Because this is not a story that starts in 2026. This is not even a story that starts in 2024. This story goes all the way back to 2009. The relationship between Drake and Jay got off to a good start when Jay tapped the Toronto MC for a guest feature on the hook to the Blueprint 3s. Off that just 6 months after Drake's breakthrough mixtape, So Far Gone. That moment was huge for a young artist from Toronto who was still transitioning from acting on a Canadian television show to becoming a rapper. Getting a call from Jay-Z meant the world. It was quite literally the stamp of approval from a man who had run hip-hop for a decade in true Jay-Z fashion. He gave the rising star platform and Drake ran with it. By 2010, Drake returned the favor by bringing Jay onto his debut album, Thank Me Late, with the track Light Up. Drake got the chance to flex his lyrical muscle against Jay's wordplay wizardry, and the result delighted fans. Jay, for his part, didn't just phone it in. He gave Drake a verse that felt like a mentorship moment captured on wax. He told him what climbing to the top would look like, what it would cost, and what it would require. And for a while, this was a dynamic. The veteran guiding the protege paying respect to the veteran. But relationships between titans never stay simple. By 2011, the tone started to shift. Drake began to position himself as the next king of rap. He started making references, some subtle, some less so, that he was coming for the throne. And this was happening during the exact same summer that Jay-Z and Kanye West released Watch the Throne. The timing was not lost on anyone. Drake, whether intentionally or not, was signaling that the era of Jay-Z's dominance was ending and his was beginning. And Jay noticed. What started as a growing relationship on Jay's, off that, and Drake's Light Up turned into an on-again, off-again battle of words. From that point forward, the two men existed in a strange limbo, publicly respectful, privately competitive, and occasionally outright hostile in the coded language that only hip-hop can produce. The thing about Jay-Z and Drake is that their rivalry was never really about music. It was about position. It was about who gets to claim ownership of the entire culture. Drake didn't just want to be a successful rapper. He wanted to be the most successful rapper in history. And for the first time in a very long time, Jay-Z found himself looking at someone who could credibly make that claim. Not because Drake was a better lyricist, that was never the argument, but because Drake had achieved something Jay-Z hadn't. He had become the most commercially dominant artist in the history of streaming-era music, period. And Jay-Z, a man who had built his entire brand on being the best at everything, found that uncomfortable. The subliminal shots started piling up. In 2013, Jay gave Drake 2 a cappella verses for what became Pound Cake on Nothing Was the Same. According to Drake, Jay gave him 2 a cappella verses he recorded during his Magna Carta Holy Grail Sessionza, very rare extension of generosity from a god. But even that collaboration had an edge to it. Jay's verse on that song included lines that, depending on how you read them, could be taken as a father speaking to a son or as a champion putting a challenger firmly in his place. Then, in 2014, the temperature rose. Drake did an interview with Rolling Stone. and dismissed Jay-Z's art-inspired raps, calling the whole rap meets art world thing corny. Jay answered on a freestyle, and the response was pointed, sharp, and unmistakable. In plain terms, he was telling Drake, "You can talk all you want, but I actually own the things you rap about." And that tension did not fade quickly. Instead, this back and forth continued for years. In 2016, Jay and Kanye both appeared on Drake's Pop Style, but when Drake's album Views dropped, their verses were missing. Drake's explanation to Zayn, low on the matter, was full of awkward body language, pleas and politician speak that suggested things between him and the self-proclaimed new Jay were a tad frosty. Nobody believed the official story that it was a creative decision. Everybody assumed something had happened behind the scenes. Then came Jay's 444 album in 2017, which included what many interpreted as more subliminal jabs. And when Jay brought his tour to Toronto, he flipped Drake's Know Yourself in his collaboration with grime MC Giggs KMT, performing remix versions of Drake's own songs on Drake's home turf. That move landed in two very different ways. Some saw it as a tribute, while others saw it as a power play. Then, in 2018, the two publicly reconciled. Drake brought Jay onto the track from Scorpion, and footage made rounds on social media of the two rap heavyweights embracing and posing for a photo at the On the Run 2 tour stop in Detroit. But even that moment came with a behind-the-scenes twist, because there's a story about how that verse even happened. Jay was on tour with his wife Beyonce and planned to record and submit his verse afterward at the venue. But here's where the story takes a major turn. Jay's longtime engineer, Young Guru, had to build a makeshift studio on the fly at the concert venue just to make it happen. The verse was sent to Drake's producer, Noah 40 Shibia, via a tethered phone signal because the venue's internet was already down. That's how tight the turnaround was. That's how much effort it took to get that collaboration across the finish line. And for a while, it really did seem like the two had buried whatever issues existed between them. But then 2024 happened, and everything changed. Once the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef erupted, it didn't stay contained between those two for long. It pulled in every major figure in hip-hop. People chose sides, alliances were drawn, careers were repositioned, and Jay-Z, whether he intended to or not, ended up right at the center of it. Roc Nation Super Bowl pick and Grammy winner Kendrick Lamar was both a controversial choice as the first solo rap headliner and in the middle of a high-profile feud with Drake. To the outside world, it looked calculated. It looked like Jay-Z, who through Roc Nation has served as the NFL's live music entertainment strategist since 2019, had used his position to hand the biggest stage in American entertainment to Drake's rival at the exact moment when it would cause the most damage. And Drake's camp was not quiet about it. It didn't take long for people to start feeling like Jay-Z's alignment with Kendrick came from malice toward Drake. Then the theories started growing louder. The narrative became more solid, and Drake, already in the middle of the fight of his career against Kendrick, now felt like he was battling the entire industry, with Jay-Z cast as an invisible hand guiding the opposition. And then there was the Beyonce theory. Podcast host Joe Budden raised a provocative claim that part of Jay-Z's coldness toward Drake had to do with something deeply personal. Budden suggested that Drake had worked on Beyonce's house album and then turned around and did his own house album, dropping it right before hers. In other words, the accusation was that Drake had taken creative work he'd done with Beyonce, applied it to his project, and then released it first, beating her to the punch. If true, Jay-Z, who is known to be protective of his family and his wife's career, would take it personally, and it would go a long way toward explaining why the Cold War between the two men intensified at the exact moment that it did. But Budden went even further, alleging that there was a meeting behind the scenes that stopped Lil Wayne from doing the Super Bowl, which, if true, would mean Jay-Z had used his institutional power to shut down Drake's own mentor from accessing one of the biggest platforms in all of entertainment. So by the time we arrive at this GQ interview in March 2026, there's an enormous amount of baggage between these two men, and Jay-Z, to his credit, doesn't duck any of it. He sits down with GQ editor Fraser Tharp for 2 sessions in January 2026, totaling roughly 4 hours of conversation. The interview is sweeping in scope. He addresses the now-dismissed sexual assault lawsuit, saying, "That whole lawsuit thing, that took a lot out of me. I was angry. I haven't been that angry. in a long time, uncontrollable anger. He talked about telling Beyoncé that he could not settle the case. "It isn't in my DNA," he says. He opens up about the emotional weight of being publicly accused. He talks about his daughter Blue Ivy's musical talent. And then, the interviewer brings up the Kendrick and Drake beef. The interviewer references Jay's early 2000s feud with Nas, calling it the genre's biggest rap beef. And Jay immediately interjects, "Well, until now." That one line was an acknowledgement. Jay-Z was saying publicly that what happened between Kendrick and Drake was bigger than what happened between him and Nas. And let that sink in for a moment, because that is not a small statement coming from the man who was on one side of the most legendary battle in hip-hop history. When asked directly about his role in choosing Kendrick for the Super Bowl, Jay-Z was blunt. He said he chose a guy that was having a monster year and insisted it had nothing to do with the beef. He pushed back hard on conspiracy theories, saying it couldn't be that these guys just don't like each other, drawing a parallel to how his own feud with Nas was a long time brewing before it ever went public. He said he actually regrets the Nas beef because he really likes Nas. He even acknowledged that his stance might seem hypocritical given his own history. Jay admitted, "I realize it's a bit hypocritical because of how many battles I've been in, but insisted that growth means arriving at uncomfortable conclusions." He said he loves the sparring, but that in this day and age, there's so much negative stuff that comes with it that you almost wish it didn't happen. He pointed to the fact that people that like Kendrick hate Drake, no matter what he makes, and said that level of personal attack on someone's character goes too far. He called out the involvement of children in the beef as a line that should never be crossed, noting, "It's bringing people's kids in it. I don't like that." And then he dropped a line that shook everyone. He said he doesn't know if battling needs to be part of the culture anymore. Now, pay close attention here, because all of that sounds reasonable on paper. It sounds like a mature man looking back on his career and offering wisdom. But here's the part that set the internet ablaze. In the middle of all of this measured, philosophical reflection, Jay-Z also made it clear that he sees himself as untouchable. When asked about the conspiracy theories that he undermined Drake, he didn't just deny them, he laughed at them. He said, "I'm Jay-Z," and then he doubled down. "I'm HOV." Now, respectfully to Drake and to the millions of people who saw those words spread across every hip-hop media outlet in the world, the message was unmistakable. Jay-Z was saying he's too big, too important, and too established to care about what Drake thinks happened. He was, in essence, dismissing the idea that Drake was even significant enough to conspire against. And that is the exact context in which Drake posted his video. The video was posted on Drake's Instagram, and within minutes, it was everywhere. The timing alone tells you everything you need to know. Drake waited just long enough after the GQ interview dropped for the quotes to reach maximum saturation. He waited for "I'm Jay-Z" to become a meme, a headline, and a talking point on every podcast and YouTube channel in hip-hop. And then he dropped his response, not in words, but in a video. And the video doesn't just address the GQ interview. It digs into something much deeper. It touches on the lawsuit that Jay-Z had just spent an entire magazine cover story addressing. It touches on the relationships and business dealings that Jay-Z has fought to keep private. It touches on the things that the hip-hop world has whispered about for years but never said out loud. And Drake, characteristically, says them out loud. But here's what makes this moment particularly loaded. It's the broader legal context. Drake is appealing to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in his defamation suit. That case, which centers on whether Drake was defamed during the 2025 Grammy Awards and the Super Bowl halftime show, is still active, with Drake's reply due April 17th, 2026. So Drake is not just operating as a musician right now. He is operating as a plaintiff in a federal lawsuit.